All right, what's going on YouTube? All right, this lens came out a while ago, but we're doing a review on this. This is the Canon RF 100mm macro f2.8. So let's go ahead and dive into this. Starting off with price, Best Buy had it for $999.99, Amazon, B&H, Adorama, and Canon had it for $999 flat. At the time of me doing the research on this lens for this video. As far as the aperture goes, it is f2.8 to f32. It has a 67mm filter thread. It has 9 aperture blades. On the side, there is an SA control switch. Basically what that does is it allows adjustments to shape the character of the foreground and the background bokeh. The max magnification on this lens is 1.4 times. The construction is fully plastic with a metal mounting ring. It has weather sealing gasket. The focus ring on this is smooth and tight. There also is that customizable lens ring that Canon has, and it also has factory hard stops or clicks. So I believe you can send that into Canon and they can remove those for you at a charge. As far as the image stabilization goes, it has up to 5 stops if you're using like an EOS R or like an RP. It has up to 8 stops of image stabilization and correction if you're using something like an R5, R6, or R3. The weight with the lens caps is 1 pound and 9.4 ounces, and the weight with the lens caps off is 1 pound 7.9 ounces. As far as the close focusing distance goes, it is 10 1/8 of an inch, and that's what I got doing my testing. As far as bokeh goes, the bokeh is soft but somewhat distracting at f2.8. But it does very well on smaller subjects. So if you're shooting like macro or doing product photography on smaller objects, you should get some pretty decent bokeh with that. As far as larger subjects go, it leaves something to be desired, as the bokeh just looks like it should be in focus, but it isn't. And that's just my opinion. As far as the image test goes, let's go ahead and dive into that. At f2.8, there is a heavy vignette, pincushion distortion, the center is tack sharp, and the corners are good and sharp as well. Stopping down to an f5.6, we notice the vignette start to disappear, but the whole image overall is sharp, and at f22 in my testing, I noticed that the image starts to soften due to diffraction. As far as color fringing and chromatic aberration goes, at f2.8 we see light green and magenta color fringing on high contrasting edges, but by f4 the chromatic aberration and color fringing has disappeared. If you enjoy doing a long exposure, I will say that the sun stars on this are nice when they are stopped down. So if you enjoy doing long exposures like in towns and cities and you like having those really nice pointy stars, go ahead and stop that down to somewhere around like f14 to f22 and you should be all right. As far as astrophotography goes, at 100 millimeters, you will definitely need something like a star tracker if you plan on using this for astro, as the shutter speed will not be long enough without you getting star trails. Now at 100 millimeters for astro, I mean, you're looking at probably like a 2-second exposure. Even at f2.8, that's really not a whole lot of light. You can bump up the ISO, but then you're starting to introduce more noise. I think if you are just primarily doing astrophotography, I would just invest into a star tracker, and that's just my opinion. Now let me talk to you about this lens from the standpoint of somebody who's been using it for a little over a month now. I've used this to shoot portraits with. I've used it to do macro, product photography, and just kind of like walking around the yard having fun with it. It does pretty good for portraits. I will say it definitely gets some of those intimate detailed shots, and the f2.8, I mean, does look okay. I just think it's a little bit more distracting if you're shooting portraits with it, and that's just my opinion. If you're doing product photography or if you're doing macro photography, you really shouldn't have any issues getting like a nice blown out background. I will say if you're doing product photography with this lens, which I think this lens is really good for in my opinion, if you stop it down to somewhere around like f11, f8, f11, somewhere around there, I mean, you're basically gonna get pretty much almost everything in focus. So, and then like what I do is I take that image into Photoshop and I erase all the backgrounds and put my own kind of style onto that. So take that into account as well. For macros, obviously, I mean, you get a 1.4 times magnification. In my honest opinion, if you want to save more money, I would go with the Laowa 100mm macro, as that is a 2 times magnification. Now, I did own that Laowa lens for a little while, and I will say this much as far as the Laowa lens goes, that 2 times magnification gets you a lot closer than this Canon RF 100, and it's about 400 or 500 bucks. You could probably find them used for somewhere around like 300 or 400 bucks. And honestly, I mean, it takes some pretty spectacular images. It obviously doesn't have image stabilization or autofocus, so take that into account as well. But if you enjoy doing macro photography and you enjoy doing product photography and stuff, in my honest opinion, I think if you want to save a couple $100, I would go with a Laowa myself. But if you want image stabilization and autofocus and weather sealing, I would just go ahead and snag this Canon RF 100 macro. For portraits, for product photography, for macro photography, and for some other stuff, I mean, you can't really necessarily do a lot of straight photography with it, but you can get some pretty interesting results, so take that into account. But the three main categories for this lens are probably best suited for portraits, macro, and product photography, and that's just my opinion, so take that into account. If you guys like this video, go ahead, give it a thumbs up, give it a like. If you didn't like it, also give it a thumbs up, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit all the buttons. I'm Jordan, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.